Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and welcome to the third annual BBB Better Business Summit. I'm Paula Scarpetti, BBB President and CEO of your Better Business Bureau. Finding a way to survive in 2020 has been a challenge for many organizations. It has been a time to reinvent your company and to bring a new passion to your business. Your BBB is offering this virtual summit at no cost this year to help you grow your business during these turbulent times. This has all been made possible by our sponsors, who have helped bring this opportunity to you today. They can be found by clicking on the Sponsors tab on the event page, betterbusinesssummit.com. All sponsors would like to engage with you since they mirror our goal of helping support businesses through this difficult time. As an ongoing service, your BBB has been and will continue offering a monthly series of no-cost webinars to help inform business professionals. Please use your BBB as we continue to be a resource for your business as you wade through 2020 and beyond. Amid a changing business environment, which includes video employment interviews, educational webinars, virtual staff meetings, and social media updates, we can find new opportunities that may outlive our old way of doing things. This year, as businesses attempt to find clarity in their future, BBB is offering sage advice from local business leaders relating to reestablishing and energizing your business. This year's Better Business Summit will focus on bringing a zest to your business model with a determination and urgency to do more than survive, but to thrive. We will now kick off the summit with a word from our presenting sponsor, Bob Ruffalo. He is a founder and CEO of Impact, an agency he formed over 11 years ago to help people find success with inbound marketing through education, events, and agency services. Bob is also a BBB director and chairman of the BBB Events Committee. Join me in welcoming Bob.
Thanks so much, Paula. And what's up, everyone? Welcome to, I can't believe it's already the third annual Better Business Summit, and boy, times have changed. Looking back the last couple of years, we were all together, big room, big lights, big experience, music going, and we're living in 2020 in a world of COVID. 2020 has been a very challenging year for our businesses. If you go back to 2019, 2018, we're looking at how we optimize our business for profits, how we market better online, cybersecurity. We're looking at all these different things. Enter 2020, and we got things that we're dealing with that we never thought we'd have to deal with before. We didn't learn about this in business school. We never had to deal with these things in our business. We got 3 crises going on at once. We've got certainly a health crisis going on. We've got an economic crisis going on. And we also have a social crisis going on. And as business leaders, how do we deal with all of these things? And I respect each and every one of you for taking the time today to learn how to grow your business better in 2020. Because certainly education matters so much today, more than it has ever mattered before. And that's why we're so honored to be part of this Better Business Summit. We strongly believe in education for businesses. That's what we do here at Impact. We are a digital sales and marketing, consulting, and education business, and we're very aligned with what this Better Business Summit is all about. At Impact, we believe in our mission is to create heroes, grow businesses, and change lives. Heroes, creating heroes, those people inside your organization that make magic happen. They're growing, they're learning, they're putting these things into practice. And because of that, the business grows. And because of that, the lives of the business owners, the lives of themselves, their careers, everything changes, never going back to that. And that's what Impact is all about. The way we do this, like I said, is through digital sales and marketing, consulting, and education. We do it off the framework of a book called They Ask You Answer, which is being taught in universities. Thousands and thousands of businesses all over the world are applying the principles of They Ask You Answer inside their businesses to find digital marketing and digital sales transformation. We are honored today to have the author of They Ask You Answer, Marcus Sheridan, here with us. He will walk through all of these principles. He's also my business partner. He's also one of the best speakers I've ever seen in my entire life. Marcus, we're so glad to have you here at the Better Business Summit. Take it away, brother.
Bob, appreciate that. Thanks everybody for joining. We've got a bit over an hour together, and so we've got a lot of things to accomplish. I don't want to forget this though, and that is, if you have questions, make sure that you just use the you can use the chat or the questions. I've told Bob that he can interrupt me at any point if he feels like a question comes through that would benefit the group. He also knows that some questions are going to come through that I'm going to probably answer as we go. So if yours doesn't get mentioned, fret not. I'm also going to give you my email at the end of this as well too. And so let's just dive into it, and let's discuss what we're going to be looking at over these next, I guess, 70 minutes now or something of that sort. We're going to look at how today's buyers changed and what that means for sales and marketing going forward. It's quite important. We're going to look at this simple yet profound content strategy for building trust, traffic, leads, and sales. It's called They Ask You Answer. Bob mentioned that. We're going to talk about this beautiful sales process called assignment selling, something your sales teams will appreciate very much if you do it. And then we're going to have a frank conversation as to why so many companies fail to do this and how you own your space going forward. So I always like to start with this number because I think it's the most significant trend that has happened in business really over the last 100 years. And that's this phrase, 0 moment of truth, and this number 70%. So 0 moment of truth is that moment that a prospect contacts you and you know they exist. So it could be the moment that they fill out a form on your website. It could be the moment that they walk into your location or that they call you. But it's the moment you now know they might want to do business with you. And this is what we know to be true, because the studies have shown it. This isn't our study at Impact. These are much smarter companies that have come to these realizations. We know this to be true. Today, on average, 70% of the buying decision is made before 0 moment of truth. In other words, 70% of the buying decisions made before they call you, before they contact you, certainly before they talk to a salesperson on your team. And recently, they redid this study, and they're saying now that the number is 80%. 80%. So the question is, what does this mean for organizations? Because if we analyzed it together for a second, we said, okay, if we went back 20 years, right when the internet was really getting started, and we said what percentage of the buying decision was made before someone talked to your company, before they talked to a salesperson, we'd probably say that number was around 20 to 30%. Today, we're at 70, 80%. The question is, where are we going to be over the next 5, 10, 15 years? What does it mean for your business? Also have to ask ourselves a couple questions like, if this number is true, which department of your organization has a greater impact on the actual sale? Is it the sales department or is it the marketing department? Yes, marketing departments now have a greater influence on the actual sale. Yet notwithstanding, when there's times of economic distress, usually for most companies, which is the first department that gets laid off or resources cut? Once again, it's marketing. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's the way that we do it. And of course, the reason why we do that is because that's the way we've always been doing it. We've always seen, if you look at financial spreadsheets within organizations, we see sales as revenue, we see marketing as an expense. But I can tell you today, if we're going to be very, very successful, we need to see the two under the same umbrella with incredible importance, not one versus the other, but they're both incredibly important. And so, yes, our buyer is evolving, and therefore our sales and marketing department should be evolving as well. One of the things that we teach at Impact is the importance of revenue teams. And a revenue team is essentially when your organization realizes this number and sales and marketing falls underneath that umbrella that is the revenue team, and therefore see themselves as having the same goals and responsibilities. Sales is a part of marketing. Marketing is a part of sales. But it's critical that we agree on this as we have our conversation today about the changing buyer. So my quick story, I used to be a pool guy. In fact, I still own a swimming pool company in Virginia called River Pools and Spas. And this is about one of 1,500 fiberglass swimming pools my little company is installed in Virginia. And you might be saying, why are we talking to a pool guy right now? Okay, I promise it'll make sense as we go. So we started this company in 2001. So I was literally right out of college. Things were going okay up until 2008. And you remember this in 2008, that was the day of the crash. And that was a really bad day for pool companies. In fact, that was, I remember that day really well because we had 5 people within the next 48 hours that withdrew their deposit, and they just said, we can't do it. We can't get this pool right now, Marcus, because we're so concerned about the economy, about the market. So we lost about $250,000 in business in the first 48 hours. And then over the coming weeks, it got worse and worse. By January 2009, we were going over that proverbial edge. I talked to 3 consultants. They all said the same thing, Marcus, you should file bankruptcy. But the problem was, if I filed bankruptcy, I was going to lose my home. My business partners were going to lose their homes. My 16 employees at the time would have lost their jobs. And so we had to figure out how to get back over that edge without really spending much money at all. We didn't have any. We certainly didn't have much time. But that's the cool thing about stress, right? And you've probably already seen this for yourself in your business this year. Oftentimes it forces us to do things we otherwise wouldn't have done, probably knew we should have done a long time ago. And in this moment, I started to read all these fancy phrases online, like inbound marketing, content marketing, social media, blogging, all that stuff. And, technical phrases to me, but what I heard in my simple pool guy mind was, you know what, Marcus, if you just obsess over your customers' questions and you're willing to address them specifically on your website, through text, through video, you might save your business. So I said, well, if there's one thing that we can do is we can listen well and we can answer their questions. And so we embraced the philosophy, and Bob mentioned this philosophy. And what's cool about this philosophy is now companies all over the world have embraced it because it became a book, a bestseller, and it's called They Ask You Answer. So what is They Ask You Answer? They Ask You Answer is literally an obsession, and I mean that when I say that, with the fears, worries, concerns, questions that our buyers have. That's where it starts, and the willingness to address those on our site. It doesn't stop there, though. It's an obsession with how they want to learn. In other words, if they want to learn the thing a certain way, do we say, no, this is the way that we communicate it? Or do we say, no, we need to adjust to today's buyer? For example, by saying, well, I don't like video, so because I don't like video, why would we do video? That's a pretty silly statement to make. Yet I've seen a lot of companies make that statement, right? And so if our buyers want to see it, are we willing to show it? It's the same thing with They Ask You Answer. It's the way we sell the thing. If a buyer wants to buy it a certain way, are we willing to adjust the way that we sell it to meet the demands of today's buyers? If you look at those 3 things right there, the questions they ask, the way they want to learn, the way they want to buy, that's where so much innovation is happening in the market today. You do not have to invent a new product or a new technology or a new methodology so as to be very innovative in the marketplace. You just got to be willing to talk about it and show it differently than others do in your space. And that's the essence of They Ask You Answer. So we're going to dive more into that, but I want to lay a foundation that's so important for all of us as business owners. You might be a B2B service-based business. You might be B2C. You might be B2G, business to government. You could be any of those things. But I can tell you the conversation that we're going to have today is based on this powerful emotion that every business is built upon, because there's a lot of differences in businesses, but there's also a lot of similarities. And the one building block I think we can all agree to is that we're all built on this emotion called trust. And that's the battle that we wage every single day. Can we induce more trust than our competitors in the marketplace? It is fundamental to our success. I want to show you how to become that voice of trust. So my ask for you, and this is really the BBB way, right, is that we don't put ourselves in that corner of, oh, we're special, we're different. Instead, we say, you know what? Is it possible that I apply that thing? Is it possible that we could do that? How could we apply that? My promise to you is you could. At Impact, we worked literally with now hundreds and hundreds of organizations, B2B and B2C. We have about a 50-50 split with the customers that we work with. And fundamentally, this doesn't change whatsoever. So as you stay with me, I think you're going to be flooded with ideas of things you should be talking about to induce more stress, activities you should be doing, digitally speaking, to induce more stress, and you're going to get a lot out of this. Now, the thing about They Ask You Answer, it has an opposite, and that opposite in this case would be what we call ostrich marketing. Now, an ostrich, when it has a problem, what does it do? It sticks its head in the sand, which is actually a myth, but it's a cool example, so we'll use it. But why does it stick its head in the sand? Because it thinks the problem's going to go away. But does the problem ever really go away? Of course, the answer is no, right? And so how does this apply to us as businesses? We say, well, has there ever been a question that you get all the time from your customers or potential customers where you said to yourself, you know what, we really can't address that on our website? Well, it's a very good chance that there's a bunch of those. You might be able to think of a few of them right now. I'm going to talk about those. But here's the issue. Can you become the voice of trust in your space and ignore the questions that your customers want to understand as they're going through this 70%, as they're really vetting you, as they're learning? And of course, the answer is no. We cannot be the voice of trust and the ostrich. So how do we become the opposite of that? Well, it starts with what we call the big five. You'll read about this and they ask you answer, but here's essentially what the big five is. The big five are the 5 subjects that we as consumers, as buyers, we're obsessed with researching and understanding before we engage a company. Keyword being before we engage a company. In other words, we want to feel like we understand these things, and once we get them, then we say things like, okay, I think I can call them now. Okay, I'll walk to the, I'll walk through the doors of that store now. Okay, I'll engage that company now. Okay, I'll go ahead and fill out that form now. So what are the 5 things that you always tend to research before you're making a major purchase? Do you think of any of those things that you consistently research online? Think about it. I know you know what they are. So here's the 5 things. Typically, we find that consumers, buyers are obsessed with how much does it cost, problems or what are the negatives with it, comparisons, what's everybody saying about it, reviews. In other words, what's everybody in the marketplace that has bought it saying, and best. What is the best it? So cost, problems, comparisons, reviews, and best. This is what buyers are obsessed with. And the sad reality is most businesses don't like to talk about these 5 things. They would rather be the ostrich. And so we're going to talk about how you can talk about these 5 things, these big 5 subjects. You might say right now, how in the world would we talk about cost as a service business? Don't worry, we're going to talk about that today. First, I want to address this. Where do you talk about it? I know in the past, you might have heard blog, and you might have blog on your website, but I want you to think bigger, because the future is that you literally have on your website a learning hub or a learning center or a knowledge center. So let me give you an example of that. If you went to the River Pools website right now, you'd see this on the homepage. It says, view our extensive learning center. And quickly you're like, what? They produced 140 videos about pools? Whoa. 700 educational articles? Yowzas. 22 million people have viewed this website? Yeah, that's right, 22 million people. So that gives you this impression of, I have stumbled upon the Wikipedia of pools. And so do you have a learning center like this on your website right now? So for example, a place where you would have articles as a category, videos as a category, could be brochures as a category, could be case studies as a category, could be recorded webinars or podcasts or any of these things that you can teach people with. So you want to have a learning center. That's where all these things should live on your website. We build learning centers all the time at Impact for companies. They're not very expensive. And so the key is that you have this type of setup to where you can deliver this world-class information that's not biased. It's not a sales pitch. It's literally just answering their questions in different ways. Let me give you another example of how one of our clients does it at Impact. This company is a manufacturer of metal roofing materials. And so if you go to their website, it's great because you see certain things like on their homepage, you're like, oh, check out our blog page right now and look at our metal roofing channel. And they have this wonderful learning center that has all these, see our brochures, see our videos. And you're like, wow, I've never seen so much education on metal roofing. This is absolutely amazing. So how do we talk about cost, right? I'm going to talk with you now about that because it's one of those questions that everybody has. And so let's just analyze this together and be super self-aware as we're looking at this together, because this is always one of those heated topics. Should I or should I not talk about cost and price? Inherently, we all have a sense for this, but let's analyze the psychology behind it. So when you're on a website and you're looking for cost and price information as a buyer, as a consumer, and you cannot find it, what is the emotion you experience, right? Well, you probably are saying frustration. Yeah. You feel frustrated. Why? Because you're the buyer and you're trying to get some information, yeah? And they're making it very hard. So in this moment of frustration, do you say, I'm sure it's on this website somewhere. I'm just going to keep looking in here until I find it? Of course, the answer is no, you don't do that. In that moment of frustration, Do you instead say, you know what, of course they're not talking about cost and price. They're a B2B service-based business. I'm going to call them on the phone instead. You don't do that. What do? You keep looking, right? And you look until what happens? Until you find the answer you were looking for. And generally speaking, whoever gives you the answer you were looking for is going to get what? If not your business, at least they're going to get first contact, first phone call. That, my friends, is the circle of life online. And the real reason we get so upset as buyers, customers, consumers in that moment is because we know that they know as the business the answer, or at least a semblance of the answer, a feel for the answer. And because we know they know the answer, not giving it to us, we now feel like they're hiding something from us. And the moment you feel like anybody is hiding anything from you online, what happens? Of course, trust is gone. And that's the business we're in. And so, are you talking about cost and price of your products or your services right now? We find that the very high majority of businesses do not. Well over 95% of B2B service-based businesses do not. Okay? And even companies that think they do oftentimes do not. And so we're going to look at why they don't do it, and we're talking about how you can do this effectively, right? So there's three major reasons why companies don't talk about cost and price. The first reason is they say, well, it depends. Every job is different. We have a very customized solution. All things could be true. Now, that being said, if I came to you and I said, can you help me understand what drives the cost of your product or service up, like the factors? Could you explain that? Of course, the answer is yes. If I came to you and I said, can you help me understand the factors that would drive the cost down? Could you explain that? Of course, the answer is yes. If I came to you and I said, can you help me understand why companies are so expensive in your industry? Could you explain that? You said, yes, I could. If I came to you and I said, can you help me understand why some of your competitors are so damn cheap? Could you explain that? Yes, we could. And so those four things, those are the majors that you want to discuss, because that's what sets up what's called your value proposition, as you well know. So that's one of the easiest things to teach, yet most companies still don't do it. What a shame. Second reason why we don't talk about cost and price, other than the first one, which was, again, it depends. The second reason is we say things like, I don't want my competitors to find out. Know what's crazy about that one? If I came to you or certain sales team and I said, do you have a pretty good sense as to what your competitors charge? What would you say? So yeah, of course we do. We've done our research of the market. And so here's the thing. If you know what they charge, it therefore means, yes, they know what you charge. This is the big secret, non-secret. Everybody acts like nobody knows what everybody's charging, when in reality, everybody pretty much has a pretty decent sense, at least, as to what everybody else is charging. Besides that, when was the last time your competitors paid your bills? Probably never. The third reason why we don't like to talk about cost and price is we say things like, well, we tend to be more expensive. And if we're more expensive, we just might scare them away. But you know what's funny about that? What we've all agreed, the thing that actually scares us away is when we don't learn or see anything on cost and price. That's what drives us away. So those are the three reasons. Now, you might say, I'm still not sold, Marcus. Okay, stay with me. When we were embracing They Ask You Answer, when the first piece of content we put on our website was a guide to fiberglass pool costs. We said it's a lot like buying a car. There's options, there's accessories that would drive the cost up and down. We talked about those factors that would drive it up, factors that would push it down. We talked about why some companies were expensive, why some companies were cheap. We gave different types of packages, very basic packages, complex packages, and we gave ranges as to what you might spend for each. But we said ultimately the answer to your question is, well, it depends. But here's why this was so groundbreaking. Nobody in the world had done it. Nobody in the world had done it because all these pool companies were afraid of the same thing that 90+% of companies still 2020 are afraid to talk about, right? Because we're afraid of the competition. We're afraid to scare them away. We're not rooted in how we ourselves want to be treated online. And so because we did that, some magical things started to happen. For example, from a search perspective, it started to get really, really cool. So within 48 hours, if you went online and you search any of these phrases, to this day, you can open up a window on your computer right now as we're having this conversation. You can search any of these phrases. You're going to see first thing that shows up once you get past the sponsored advertisements, one or two is going to be something that we wrote at River Pools and Spas. Now, that's just visitors. That's not revenue. So let's talk revenue for a second. Okay, stay with me. I promise this will make sense. So here's a list of the number one phrases that generate the most traffic to our website over the next few years. So let's look at the top one, fiberglass pool prices. We had 13,000 people go to Google, 13,537 went to Google. And of those 13,537, 30 of them filled out a form and said, I want to get a quote from you. So the number that you see on the right side of the screen, that is sales appointments, essentially coming from that phrase that people searched. And so we've got roughly 200+ sales appointments that occurred from people that originally landed on that article, how much does a fiberglass pool cost? Okay. Now, the red arrows are indicating a phrase that when somebody searched that phrase, that's the article they landed on. So that's how we have 200 plus sales appointments that occurred from people that originally landed on that article. So here's the important question. If that article is never written, how many of those 200 plus sales appointments would have ever occurred from people that originally landed on that article? Of course, the answer is probably none. But because we did talk about it, we did explain it well, what happened as a result? Well, we know the number of leads that we got. We know the number of sales appointments we got. We know which ones bought. We know the average. We know the value of each one of their sales. We can add up the value of each one of those sales, and we can place them on top of one little piece of content that literally took me 45 minutes to write at my kitchen table one night. And I can tell you without equivocation that that one single article for our little company, Virginia, has made over $15 million in sales since the day it was written. Here's the key, though. Did we ever say exactly what a fiberglass pool cost? Well, we did not, because you can't say exactly what a fiberglass pool costs, just like for many of you can't necessarily say exactly what it costs. But can you teach the marketplace? Of course, the answer is yes. This one single article saved my business, it saved my company, and it turned us into what would become, of course, the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world, along with many other articles like it, which you're going to see. But the point here is, as we're having this conversation, is can you talk about cost and price, regardless of B2B or B2C or manufacturer or whatever you are? Of course, the answer is yes. Yes, you can. I'll give you an example of another manufacturer. This is Sportsman Boats. They're a client of ours. I love this company. Sportsman's the fastest growing center console offshore fishing boat in the US right now. It's a wonderful company. I love this company because they catch the vision of they ask, you answer. I'm a huge boater. And so I recently just bought my most recent boat, right? Because once you get into boating, you're always looking at your next boat. Some of you could relate to this. In fact, I bought it in Connecticut, of all places. And the cool thing about it was, you know, during this 2 years of researching what my next boat was going to be, I was online researching boats all the time, researching costs all the time. And I saw thousands of companies say, call for quote, because that's how it works in that industry for new boats. I thought, this is so stupid. Of those thousands that I saw, guess how many I actually called? Because I literally saw thousands. I mean, I would spend hours a week researching my next boat. Of course, the answer is none. None. I wouldn't do it. And so Sportsman gets it, because if you go to their website right now, and I'd recommend that you do, notice how they say real upfront pricing, no gimmicks, no need to request a quote. Glory, glory, hallelujah. When I see companies thinking like this, a buyer looks at this and says, aha, finally, I'm home. I've made it to the promised land. They're a manufacturer. They don't set their dealers' prices, but they can certainly talk about it. At Impact, we're an agency. We sell a service. How do we talk about it? Well, we talk a lot about different costs. For example, how much does inbound marketing cost? This one article that you see right here that shows up in search results for us, that's generated quite a bit of revenue for the company in sales. See, it's the same across the board. Now, real quick, what are some of the common mistakes that we see companies making when it comes to discussing cost and price? And oh, by the way, if you have any questions, make sure you ask them in the chat or the Q&A. Just go ahead and do that, and Bob will stop me if there's a question that needs to be answered, okay? Number one, not talking enough about the industry and the marketplace is the number one issue we see with cost price articles or videos, whatever it is. 80% of the time you spend on a piece of content about cost should be about the industry. Again, the four major factors: what drives the cost up, what keeps it down, why are some companies so expensive, why are some companies so cheap? Okay, that's 80%. The 20%, the rest, should be about you. Where do you fall in that range? And that's where you can really explain, again, your value proposition as a company. So make sure you do that. All right, number two mistake we oftentimes see is not including pricing anywhere in your navigation bar, really making them try to find it. Listen, guys, if you put pricing, costs, rates, whatever you want to call it, in your navigation bar, it's going to be the most or second most viewed page of your website. I can assure you of that. And if you go beyond just putting a number, but really explaining it well, I mean, it should be at least 1,000 words, at least 1,000 words of explanation. People are going to be so grateful, and you're going to see that your conversations with customers are different. All right. Another mistake that we see is being too generic and therefore making it more of a bait and switch page, right? In other words, you have a pricing page, but then all of a sudden there's just a form and says, hey, want more pricing? Call for quote. Come on, that's a hit in the face. Let's not do that. let's at least give them something to satiate their desire to understand more. Most people don't practice buying stuff, right? Did they have a class in school on how to buy the product or service that you sell? Now you might say, well, my buyers are experienced. They're not all experienced. Some of them are just getting into the industry. Some of them think they know more than they know. You know this to be true. Many of them don't necessarily understand what defines value in your space. I can tell you this, nobody ever taught me how to buy a pool when I was in school. That's how it works. And finally, number 4, assuming that the audience knows what you're talking about when referring to options, features, etc. And so when you're talking about what drives cost up and down, different factors, be careful not to suffer from the curse of knowledge. Don't assume that they'll understand that when you're talking about all these things they could get with it, that they'll naturally get it. So offer those accessories, let's say, you can link to further articles and videos that teaches them what those things actually are, what they mean. That way they say, now I get it, and the light bulbs start to come on. Okay, those are the most common mistakes when it comes to cost and price. Okay, now let's look at the second of the big 5, which are problems, issues, concerns. Now, with every product or service, there's negatives. Okay, they usually sound like this when somebody asks a question. Is it true that somebody told me that? What could go wrong if your competitor said? That's how they usually sound. So the fiberglass pool, I used to get asked all the time. So Marcus, be honest, what are the problems with the fiberglass pool? Is it true that fiberglass pools crack? Somebody told me that fiberglass pools look cheap. See, all these are negative statements, but here's what's interesting about it. When people search those online, guess what? The only reason why people search those things online is because they're actually interested in buying those things. That's how it works. You see, we don't search negatives until we actually want to buy it. And when money's on the line, we want to make sure we're not going to screw up. Like I said, people used to ask me for years, Marcus, what are the problems with fiberglass pools? No pool company in the world had addressed that. No fiberglass pool company certainly had addressed it. Why? Because that's the elephant in the room. So their mindset was, let's not talk about it. Let's just put it in the corner. They won't see the elephant in the corner. By the way, do they see the elephant in the corner? Of course they see the elephant in the corner because it's an elephant. Eventually, they're going to ask about the elephant. And so we openly talked about the problems with fiberglass pools. Top 5 fiberglass pool problems and solutions. Now, you might say, wow, that's pretty gutsy. Let's look at the results. Once again, I don't believe in, just yapping off theoretical stuff. It doesn't really do you much good as a business owner, does it? You want to hear how stuff actually generates revenue, stuff that's non-theoretical that you can apply to your business today. That's my commitment to you. I want to give you stuff that you can apply immediately. It's not based on, maybe this. No. This, we have empirical data, hundreds and hundreds of case studies. So here's a list of the number 1 phrases that generated the most sales appointments to my swimming pool company over the next few years. The number 56 sales appointments right side of the screen was River Pools and Spas. Well, that's the company name. They were looking for us already, so I don't really count that one. The rest of the people that you see on the screen were folks that didn't know who they wanted to engage. They just knew that they had a question. And so the number 1 phrase that generated the most traffic to the website over the next few years was fiberglass pools problems. Excuse me, most sales appointments over the next few years was fiberglass pool problems. Now think about that for a second. How is it possible that talking about the problems with your stuff could in this case generate well over a few $1 million in sales? Well, greatest way in life to resolve a concern is to address it when? Before it becomes a concern. That's right. This is what induces trust. And this is what's possible for you as well. Another one of our clients, I talked about Sheffield Metals earlier, again, metal roofing manufacturer. Guess what? When people start to research metal roofing material and a metal roof for their roof, they oftentimes wonder, so what could go wrong here? There's pros and cons. Not a lot of people have a metal roof, so what are the issues? And so very intelligently, what do? Well, they came out with certain pieces of content that openly talked about it. For example, if you go to their YouTube page, the Metal Roofing channel, 7 common problems of a metal roof. This is a metal roofing manufacturer talking about the problems of the metal roof. Now, in less than 2 years, it got 250,000 views. That's a lot for a niche like metal roofing problems. Think people want to know? Yep, they're all buyers. They're all buyers, every one of them, because they want to know. I don't want to make a mistake with my money, with my roof, with my home. Is this possible for you? Of course it's possible for you. Think about all the questions you've been asked over the years. Is it true that somebody told me that? And if it's a negative question, own it. because if you don't own it, somebody else will. Okay, let's look at comparisons. We love to compare online. So we've talked about cost, we've talked about problems. Now we're going to look at comparisons. All right. People used to ask me all the time, Marcus, be honest, tell me the difference between a concrete and a fiberglass pool. You know, I mean, I know you sell fiberglass. Why should I choose fiberglass over concrete or vinyl? Now, the issue with that is we tend to be really, really biased when people ask us to compare things online. Yep, it can be an issue. And so how do we overcome that issue? Well, we talk about this in They Ask You Answer. This is something that we teach our clients. We always have to review their content because when companies start to produce content, they tend to be very biased at first. And so it's a process of overcoming these biases. They don't, I mean, it's like subconscious that comes out and manifests itself in their writing and their videos. So we help them overcome that. But it starts with disarming. What is disarming? Disarming, if you think about it, like when there's a hostage situation, one of the first thing that the negotiator says to the bad guy is, go ahead and put your weapons down. Put your weapons down. Why does he or she say that? Well, the reason why the person says that, the negotiator, is because they realize unless you put your weapons down, you can't have a conversation that leads to any trust because the person's guarded, right? And so we've got to overcome that. So how do we do that? So let's look at a piece of content that we produce. This is my business partner, Jason Hughes, produced this one. Fiberglass versus vinyl liner versus concrete pools, an honest comparison, just from the title alone. You know, we constantly see content online. People say things like, why you should choose fiberglass over concrete. That's a dumb title, folks. Why is it dumb? Because it shows bias. Think about all the pieces of content you might have right now that naturally states your position of bias just in the title. That's flawed. See, this is the type of thing that we have to teach companies to overcome. Now, let me read you a little bit of this. This is pretty interesting what happened here. So, article starts off like this. Is there an unbiased comparison of fiberglass in-ground pools, vinyl liner pools, and concrete pools on the internet? Once again, immediately, we're hitting them with this feeling of, this is interesting. It's a question. A client of mine who recently reached out to me doesn't think so. He stated in an email, as you're no doubt well aware, it's a desert wasteland when trying to find information on pools. Sorting through the internet for usable information is difficult in the extreme. Of the few forums I found, most evolve into trolls arguing gunite pools versus fiberglass versus vinyl over and over and over and over. What would help a great deal is to find some kind of unbiased information that explains each pool in detail and then backs off, letting me or the customer make the final decision. This article is my effort to provide an objective source of information about 3 types of in-ground swimming pools. The approach is simple. I list the advantages and disadvantages of fiberglass in-ground pools, vinyl liner pools, and concrete pools, and then back off so you can form your own opinion. Isn't that glorious? Serious question. How often do businesses speak to you like that online? Do you speak to your customers like that online? Do you admit that your product, your service has any flaws? Do you talk about the pros and the cons of your product or your service? If you're not, you're never going to reach the level of trust that's possible. I know it's contrary to what we've always done before, but I can assure you, if you've always done it before, you'll be guaranteed the same results. We both know that to be true. And so because we did that today, if you go online and you compare any type of in-ground pool, we're the first ones you're going to see. Go ahead, go online, search them. We own this conversation. It's made us millions in revenue. And remember, we don't say that you should choose fiberglass. We present the facts. We let you decide. One of our clients is a furniture company. They're called Lazy Boy Southeast, and they're a Lazy Boy provider. They're not the manufacturer. They're just one of the retailers. Now, they understand that one of the major versus or comparison questions they get all the time is Lazy Boy versus Ashley Furniture. And so they could ignore it, like guess who ignores it? Lazy Boy corporate, Ashley Furniture corporate. They both ignore it. They shouldn't ignore it. I mean, heck, they're the manufacturers, but they're not thinking like buyers. But Lazy Boy Southeast, they think like the buyer. They're obsessed with the buyer. That's They Ask You Answer. And so if you go online, you search this answer box, boom, it's their website. And if you search Lazy Boy versus Ashley, boom, videos, boom, more articles. They dominate. They completely dominate. All right, let's look at the final 2 together, reviews and the best. So far, the big 5, we've talked about cost, problems, and comparisons. Now we're going to combine the final 2. Now, before we combine the final two, let me ask you a question. Have you ever been asked, or one of your salespeople ever been asked a question like, we like you guys, we do, but if we don't do business with you, is there anybody else that you might recommend? You ever been asked that question? If you have, good for you, because it means that people trust you enough to ask. But how do most companies answer that question? Most don't answer very honestly. Maybe we'll send them to the worst competitor that we have. I'm sure some of you do send them to a good competitor, but most companies do not. And certainly most companies don't talk about that online. One night when I was still a pool guy, and this was probably about, I don't know, about 8-9 years ago, right at the end of being just a pool guy, I was selling a pool in Richmond, Virginia. And I met with this couple for like 2.5 hours. And at the end of that 2.5 hours, they said to me, Marcus, we like you. We think we want to get this pool from you. But if we don't get this pool from you, is there anybody else that you might recommend? And I thought to myself, I hate this question. I really do. And so I didn't sell the pool that night because they were still looking. But I had a long drive home. And I thought to myself, well, they asked the question, which means what? I need to answer it. So I went home that night and I wrote this article right here. Who are the best pool builders in Richmond, Virginia? Review/ratings. And I came up with a list of 5 of the best pool builders in Richmond, Virginia. A question for you. Did I put myself on that list of 5? Believe it or not, I did not. You say, why did you not? Folks, if you create a best of list and then put yourself on said list, what happens? You lose trust, you lose credibility, and again, that's the business we're in. Besides, do I need to? I mean, let's read the first couple paragraphs together. What's your impression of this company after you read the first couple paragraphs? Each year, we at River Pools and Spas meet with well over 100 households in the Central Virginia, Richmond area with respect to their in-ground swimming pool installation. Because so many folks know our thoughts and feelings from this website on all things pool construction, they often ask us, who are some of the other builders, competitors we have in the area? We're never one to shy away from being blatantly honest with respect to the competition, and we want our customers to be as informed as possible. Here's a list of some of the companies that have a solid in-ground pool building history in the Richmond area. So what's your impression of this company right now? You're like, I feel like they're pretty honest. That's right. Do you think they're an authority? Yep. Do you think they're an authority? Why do you think that? Because they were willing to address the elephant in the room. Glorious, right? You say, what's the results of this, Marcus? Well, I'll show you the result. Of course, if you go online and you search best pool builders, Richmond, Virginia, this is usually the first one you're going to see. That's generated a lot of revenue, but that's not the really cool part. Let's see, you went online, you search reviews Playmore Pools, Richmond, Virginia. Now, Playmore happens to be my biggest competitor in Richmond, Virginia. Once you get past Yelp, which most people aren't going to click on for pools anyway, next one you're going to see is what? Who are the best pool builders in Richmond, Virginia? Huh, interesting. That's us. That's us. And that's why today, if you're researching any of our competitors, oftentimes when you're going to learn about them where? On our website. Now, you might say, oof, that's really, really gutsy. Yeah, but if somebody wants to know who your competitors are, roughly how long will it take them to figure it out? This is why I know and you know that consumer ignorance is no longer a viable sales and marketing strategy. Buyers, they may start uninformed, but they are not dumb. Eventually, they will be informed. And if we treat them as intelligent human beings, it's amazing what we can teach them, what we can tell them, and therefore the trust that we can induce because of it. But if we just ignore the questions, we're not going to become that voice. We'll be the ostrich with our head in the sand. Here's another example. Top lazy boy recliners. Look at this. Look at this. So once again, they own the conversation because they're talking about it. Lazy boy doesn't talk about it. Who does? One of their retailers does. And that's why this retailer dominates when it comes to lazy boy furniture. Pretty powerful. Because we did this at River Pools, we started from 2,000 visitors a month. We got to 600,000 visitors a month. And we're almost at 1 million visitors a month during the summer today. This all happened, though, because of a simple philosophy. If anybody has a question, we're going to answer it. Honestly, transparently, we're going to do it on our website. We did it, and we didn't look back. It became the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world. I took the money that I generated from that. I built a manufacturing facility. We became the fastest growing manufacturer of fiberglass pools in the U.S. I sold that manufacturing company about 2 months ago. I still own the original company. And of course, I own the agency with Bob. It's been an amazing, amazing ride. To see not only River Pools come full circle and it changed my life and go from a place of financial fear and worry all the time to financial peace, but also to being able to see so many businesses do this as well. And that's what's possible when you lean into what buyers want. And this is what we teach companies to do every day at Impact. Why it's so fun. Just to give you a sense for the most viewed content for river pools this year, I think it's fascinating looking at stats like this. All right, how much is my fiberglass pool really going to cost us? Number one, a guide to in-ground pools, pool sizes, costs, prices, etc. You're like, well, how is that different? Well, it's different because having a conversation about a fiberglass pool is different than a conversation about an in-ground pool, because that's a different question. Different questions on different topics, even though they're in the same industry, merit their own answers. That's the essence of the ask you answer. How much does an above ground pool cost? Yeah, people sometimes want to put in-ground pools above the ground. So literally, some of our customers are asking that question. And so you see that people will consume the information. Look, 6 minutes, average 6 minutes. People say to me all the time, people don't have the time. They don't want to spend the time. That's such a load of baloney. People that say that have no concept of how the internet actually works. They're basing their studies on some dumb social media Facebook stat, when in reality, Facebook is not the end all when it comes to the way people behave online. This is the way people behave online. That's the essence of the ask you answer. Now, one of the things
Marcus,
that I told you,
really quick, if I can
Yeah,
jump in, we had a question during the pricing section, which I think will probably go across. So Daniel Butsky, she wants to know, how does concept work for a service-based company such as like an insurance company? Can you give some examples of how maybe cost problems, comparisons might work for insurance companies?
It's again with insurance. You know, I have, as you know, Bob. You know, I speak full time. Well, at least when there's not pandemics, and when there's pandemics, I'm speaking a ton virtually. And the number one industry I've spoken to is insurance. This is one of the easiest ones to apply the ask you answer to, especially cost, right? So if you look at insurance, it's based on rates. And so how you should do this as an insurer is you want to talk about the different types of insurance plans and what drives the rates up and down. It's very, very simple to do. And you can give examples of, okay, here's a typical business, here's what they spend, here's why they spend that. And by doing that, it really helps set the bar for, hey, here's what I can expect. So it's easy to do it as an insurance provider. Now, problems. There's lots of negatives that people ask about when it comes to, like, I own a business, and obviously I own a home, and so I might be asked, so does my insurance cover a flood? So in Virginia, where I live, you can have flood insurance, but it's not, a hurricane doesn't get covered, right, with certain providers, which is pretty jacked up, but that's how it works. And so that's an example of a problem space. So is it true that somebody told me that? How many times have you heard, is it true that, for an insurance company? Golly day, over and over. It's like, is it true that this plan or this policy or whatever this thing is? It's a big, there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of problems in that one that people are saying. Comparisons. I see this all the time. You take a lot of independent agents out there with these smaller shops versus the Geicos of the world, and these big boxes and whatnot. So there's different types of plans that you should be comparing. It goes on and on and on. I can go on and on. That's just that industry. I've never seen an industry that's an exception to the big five. And I wish, Bob, that we had time for everybody here to really talk about how prolific these big five questions are in their individual industries. Because if you take just cost alone, oftentimes for any single industry, that's dozens of questions around cost and price. Then you take problems, dozens and dozens of questions. So literally what I've given you today is essentially, if you brainstorm this out with your team, you'd have an editorial calendar that would last you probably a couple years if you did this the right way. We do it all the time. I mean, it's not hard to do. And I'm talking like a few pieces of content a week. You'll be unlimited in terms of your stream. If you did this for a year, your whole life is going to change as a business. Okay. Any other questions, Bob, that we need to cover now before we move on?
Yeah, so as we're looking at, and people are just looking for more examples. So I know you gave a bunch of examples on fiberglass pools, which is connected to a construction agency or construction company.
Well, that's home improvement, and that's also manufacturing. Okay, so
yes, more
we're a
construction
B2B2C manufacturer, and we're a B2C home improvement when it comes to pools. So we're both of those. And the thing about it is, guys, we could go on examples all day. There's many examples in the book, but if you're thinking of examples, you shouldn't need for me to say the example if you just take your industry and the questions your sales team gets asked all the time. All the time. You're constantly being asked about cost and price in your space. Now, your sales team right now has to give an answer. They have to explain what defines value in your space. They give a presentation. You do this all the time. Even like going back to insurance, you have to justify your rates all the time, explain why these things are what they are. And so you want to be thinking in those terms. That's why there's no exceptions. Anybody that's listening to this right now, there's no exception to, we should or shouldn't be talking about price. It's how do we most effectively talk about cost, price rates, etc. All right. Any other ones, Bob?
Good to go.
All right. Let's rock assignment selling out, guys. So what we've consistently found is when a company becomes great at content and teaching, that's only half the battle, let's say, because your sales team needs to experience a metamorphosis as well around how today's buyer has changed. Now, I have this question for you, which is how many pages of your website would a potential client or customer be willing to read on average? If you had to make a guess, most companies predict 2 or 3 pages. 2 or 3 pages. Like, I think my average customer 2 or 3 pages. We found that number is completely false. Once a company starts to think like a teacher, it's amazing how much content somebody will consume on one's website. Again, going back to these silly stats that people are too busy. No, they're not. As soon as we find something that really gives us value, we'll spend a lot of time with it, okay? Or on that website with that thing, learning about that thing. So let me tell you about a number that changed my life, number 30. At the beginning of 2013, I was comparing 2 groups of people on my website. Both had filled out a form and said, I want to get a quote, okay? So 2 groups, both fill out a form and say, I want to get a quote from you. This group here fills out the form, but doesn't buy. This group here fills out the form, says, I want to get a quote, and does buy. So what is the difference between the ones that did not versus did buy? And I noticed number 30 kept jumping out underneath the group that had bought. So what do you think that number 30 represented? Represented total pages viewed. And so let me tell you what we saw. And this was the amazing discovery. We found that if somebody read 30 or more pages of the website before the initial sales appointment, they would buy 80% of the time. I'll repeat. If somebody read 30 more pages of the website, they would buy 80% of the time. And so from that, we realized, oh my goodness, we got to sell differently. And so we started to teach our sales team how to integrate content into the sales process. It's called assignment selling. And it's amazing because what it does, it eliminates bad fit customers much sooner. And it means that you spend way more time selling, way less time teaching when you're actually talking with the prospect, with the customer. Sales teams absolutely love it. It's producing the content and then teaching this how to do it. We've seen this again and again as we train these companies how to do this. You cannot just produce the content and think the sales team is going to get it, naturally share it, naturally know how to use it. And so because we started to do this, we started to see amazing case studies like this one. It's a real person named William Grizzard, okay? And William Grizzard, this is a lead sheet from our website. So in other words, when somebody fills out a form on our site, this is the type of information we can see. So first, William Grizzard, he did an organic search. He was using Yahoo, which is interesting, and he typed in cost of fiberglass pool, and he read, it says total page views, 375 pages of the site. Okay, pretty crazy, right? 375 pages, what is wrong with you, right? What in the world? 375 pages, right? 375 pages, this guy must be retired. Maybe he's a competitor, maybe he's a stalker, what's going on here? Same night, again, true story, same night, I had another lead sheet. Turns out that Bill has a wife named Joni, and she did an organic search on Yahoo. She searches Richmond, Virginia pools. In her case, she reads 149 pages. So between these people, they've read over 520 pages of the website. So what do you think that sales appointment was like? Yeah, so I walked into the house. Bill Grizzard has a spreadsheet in his hands. The spreadsheet has every option and accessory he's getting with the pool, and all he needed from me was one little thing, of course, which was what? That's right, the price. I walked out of that house 45 minutes later, not 3 hours like the norm. 45 minutes later, signed contract, $5,000 deposit. And as I drove away, I started to laugh because I realized something. How much selling had I done that day? Of course, the answer is 0. So was he past 70%? Yeah, he was at like 99.999. The only job was do not screw this up, market. Wouldn't it be nice if the job of your sales team was simply just don't mess this up? Now, could that happen every time? Probably not. Could it happen way more than it does? Well, of course it could. I've realized many times since then the content, assuming it's honest and transparent, it's the greatest sales and trust building tool in the world, period. End of discussion. It doesn't quit. It doesn't leave your company. It doesn't ask for a raise. It never gets sick. It doesn't leave for a competitor. It just works and works for you. We have pieces of content that are making and generating more revenue today than they literally made 10 years ago, which is stunning if you think about it. That's what's so amazing about the internet. That snowball, you push it up the hill. It's hard at first, but then eventually it crests the hill and starts to roll down, and it grows and grows, and it becomes unstoppable, just like river pools became unstoppable in so many other companies. There's another company. It's called Yale Appliance. They're an appliance retailer in Boston, Massachusetts. And, you know, if you read the Ask Your Answer, you'll see different B2B case studies. We've got a bunch of B2B case studies on the Impact website. You know, I don't have time today to talk about all the different ways this would apply to you. That's your job as a business owner, as an innovator that knows your industry, to be able to see that the principles are true. And so when you start to see that application, it's magical. You're like, oh my goodness, it is the same across the board. You know, Steve came to me about 7-8 years ago, and he came to our team in Impact. And he said, you know, I got a problem. I'm producing content, but we're not seeing results. Like, we're not seeing much growth. And here was this traffic that he was producing this content. He wasn't seeing much growth. And so he said, what am I doing wrong? We looked at it, and I'm like, oh, Steve, I see what you're doing wrong. You're not leaning into what buyers really want to know. You're more salesy. You're not unbiased. You're not talking about the big five. Your sales team isn't participating. So we got to change. And Steve said, I'm willing to change. And so what did he do? First thing he did, this is a shot from their learning center on their website. Today, if you're on their sales team at Yale Appliance on the floor, you're required to help produce content. So you meet with one of their marketing people, and you can help produce a video or an article about a particular, review of a product or whatever that thing is. Not only that, but they produce some of the gutsiest content I've ever seen. Now, everybody pay attention to this. This is stunningly beautiful. So Steve would get asked all the time, what are the least serviced brands that you sell? Like, what's the most reliable, right? He would get asked that question all the time. By the way, that's a best. When we say best, we mean extremes. Most, top, least, okay, fewest. And so the least service, most reliable appliance brands, reviews / ratings. Now, I'm gonna read the second and the fourth paragraph. Assume for a second that you're looking at new appliances. What would be your impression of this company after reading this? Second paragraph. One of the benefits of having a huge service department is data collection. We'll be in approximately 130 to 150 homes today fixing appliances, with a good portion being less than a year old and under warranty. That's 650 homes per week, or roughly 34,000 calls yearly, not including homes with multiple calls. That's the math behind this post. It's sales generated versus warranty service calls within 1 year. Fourth paragraph. So the question is, what are we fixing the least? And then what does Steve do? He has the audacity to rate all the vendors that he sells. He shows you how many units he sold, how many units he serviced, and therefore the percentage of the units that were serviced. So who was number one? Whirlpool. Would you like to know who number 10 was? Last on his list of his vendors. If you guessed KitchenAid, you are right. They had the highest amount of units serviced. You might say, well, isn't he afraid that the vendor's going to get mad? Well, vendors, some of them were annoyed. But what did they say? Or what did he say? Steve said, I guess you just have to do better next year, won't you? Because you see, Steve dominates the industry. I mean, dominates the industry. He gets comments like this all the time, all over the world. Your objective appliance analysis and recommendation are incredibly valuable. Thank you so much for putting it out here for clueless homeowners like me to read. I'm on the West Coast, so I can't repay your generosity by giving my business. All I can give you is my heartfelt thanks. So he gets it all over the world, and you see his traffic before he started They Ask You Answer, and then he starts They Ask You Answer, and he took off. Steve sent me a screenshot just yesterday. I'm not kidding about this. Last month, he got 989,000 visitors to his website. 989,000 visitors to his website. Results, okay. 37 million 2011. This is retail. Remember, retail, brick and mortar's dead, all that stuff. 120 million 2018. Spending less on advertising than he's ever spent. More stores, higher margins in an Amazon-based industry. Tons of leads. In fact, if you take, since he started this, he's got over 135,000 contacts, and over 6,000 he can trace back to an article that they read or a video that they watched on the website. He says, I know at a bare minimum, very bare minimum, I get at least $10 million in sales that start with a piece of content on the website. That's what Steve says. At a bare minimum, he can track that. That's what's possible. That's what's possible for every single one of us. So the question is, what will prevent this from working within your organization? You know, at Impact, we help so many companies now. We've had many that have succeeded, and guess what? We've had many that have failed. Now you say, wow, why would you say that? If you're an agency, they're not supposed to fail. No, because we're really honest. And we know that there's patterns of success and patterns of failure. And at first, we didn't know it so clearly like we know it now. Today, we're extremely careful. We vet companies as hard as they vet us because we don't want them to fail. So if we feel like they're not ready to do this, we let them know. So what are the things, the patterns, if you will? What does the empirical data tell us that you've got to have or do in order to be successful with what we've talked about today? Folks, this is the part where the rubber meets the road. Please pay attention. You want to talk about action items? Here's your next thing, your one thing, your action item, 5 keys to success. Okay, number 1. You must have it as an organization have buy-in from top to bottom with this. So in other words, if you believe this to be true, that this could work for you, but let's say your sales manager doesn't get it, or somebody in your leadership team doesn't get it, you're going to have resistance, and that's going to lead to frustration and red tape. We got to get rid of the red tape. We got to get rid of those that don't catch the vision of today's digital buyer. And so that's where it starts. You've got to have buy-in. You say, how do I get buy-in? Well, I'm just going to, just plain and simple, tell them to read the book. You might say, well, that sounds self-serving, Marcus. No, it's true because I wrote it for hard-headed business leaders and sales managers. Marketers love it because it's an amazing strategy for them. But business leaders and sales managers say, finally, the light bulbs are on. I get it. Now I understand what we need to be doing digitally, the what, the how, and the why. Now, number 2, some type of initial training and long-term training. Digitally is evolving so fast. What you don't want to do is you don't want to just send an email out to your team that says, all right, everybody, I was on the BBB today, and I was listening to this pool guy. I'm telling you what, we need to start talking about cost and price on our website. No, that's not going to fly. You know that. It's not going to fly. So they need to really understand that what, that how, and that why. Just like you've heard it today. I mean, we spent an hour together, and you're like, many of you are like, this sounds amazing. Some of you are saying, this might be a fit. Some of you are saying, we're different. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. So what's going to happen next? Many of you are going to read the book or continue to learn. We've got so much information at Impact. ImpactPlus.com is our website. You can find it there too. We've got there's so much information there. I mean, frankly, everything that we people hire us for, we've already written it out online. People just want someone to hold their hand, right, and guide them and really call them, hold their feet to the fire. But you've got to have a belief that this is a long-term journey that we're going to go on as an organization. We're going to embrace the messy. It's going to be clunky. We're not going to figure video out in a day, and you're going to hear more about video today in this event. But it's things that, if you have that long-term approach, you're going to be incredibly successful. It's the law of the harvest in action. Number 3. Now, this is the part. It's easy to agree with number 1 and 2, but number 3 is a part where you start to see deviation. You start to see shortcutting. You start to see companies say, I don't know about that. Can we do a different solution? What I mean by that is somebody in your company has to have the title of content manager / videographer. Now, what do we mean by that? Because the most successful companies are not passive in the amount of qualitative content that they produce. In other words, the data has shown us that the most successful companies produce about 3 pieces of great content a week. Okay? At least 3 pieces of great content a week. So you're like, wow, that's a lot of content. Yes, it is. But if you do it for a year, you're going to take off. You're going to be wildly successful. You want to do this through text and through video. And so many of our, the high majority of our, the companies that we work with, they have a content manager on staff. They don't outsource it because, and we've written all about why outsourcing your content rarely ever produces exceptional results. Whereas the most successful companies, the ones that take off, like the Yale Appliances of the world, they have an in-house owner. Because the future of digital, I can assure you, is in-house ownership of content. And so where should you get a content manager? Go after recent journalist graduates. Think about it. Most of them can't get jobs in the newspaper or magazine space, whatever it is. They have good writing skills. Many of them are very familiar with the internet, with social media, etc. They make a perfect content manager. And the demand is not high, so therefore there's a high supply. You can do very well with that. And you can hire them at a much lower rate than you would think. Same thing with videographers. Same thing with videographers. We oftentimes give guidance on this, and we, in fact, at Impact, we've written about this. You can go to Google right now and type in how to hire a content manager or how to hire a videographer. And we've written all about it. We'll show up in search, but it's just, there's a lot out there for this. Number 4, required participation. This is not a passive thing. So one of those things, just like with Yale Appliance, Steve said, as part of your job description, you're to participate with marketing and help them produce content. It's not the job of marketing to be the subject matter expert in the company. It's the job of marketing to facilitate what's in the head of the subject matter experts and get it up on the screen. That's marketing's job. And so this is why you want to get that journalist-like person or that videographer to be able to interview those subject matter experts like yourself. Okay? At Impact, we've got somebody who's got a lot of journalism skills. Because Bob and I are so incredibly busy, this person meets with us a couple times a month, and we don't have to write stuff, but our words find their way on a screen. Now, some of you might be saying, I'm too small, or we don't have the budget for that. Well, that may be true, at which point you've got to give yourself the title of content manager / videographer. Just as Michael Gerber would say in the E-Myth, right? You've got all the titles and the positions of the company. Sometimes you got to wear multiple hats. For 2 years, I was the content manager and the videographer while I was the head of sales for my company, while I was also the owner. This is why when people say to me, Marcus, I don't think we have the time for this, I don't have empathy. I say that because when we're in pain, we're about to file bankruptcy, suddenly we find time to do that which is going to make the biggest difference. And that's exactly what we did in that case. Finally, use the right tools to measure this. Notice today how I kept referring to revenue that we had generated from the content we had produced. You might have asked yourself, where did you get that information? Well, the tool that we use at Impact is called HubSpot, H-U-B-S-P-O-T. Again, H-U-B-S-P-O-T. If you have questions about us, let us know. You can reach out to me directly. It's not the only tool of the kind by any stretch, but there's a reason why so many business owners have heard of HubSpot. We feel it's the best digital sales and marketing measurement tool, ROI tool, in the world today for the majority of businesses. Not for all very large enterprise-based businesses, but for certainly small to medium-sized businesses, we feel like it's the best solution. And if you don't have a tool that is allowing you to say, okay, we did all this digital marketing, digital stuff this year, this is the amount of money we spent, but here's the amount of revenue that we generated. If you cannot say that, my friends, then it just means that we're guessing at the end of the year when we're making our plans. Let's not be in a place of guessing. Let's make sure that we know. Well, folks, we are at the end, and hopefully this was helpful to you, giving you a vision of what's possible when you become the best teacher in your space. You can reach out to me, Marcus at my personal website is marcussheridan.com. You can also find us at impactplus.com. Impactplus.com is the website. And I think we might have time for a few questions. So Bob, are there any other questions that have come through the final minutes? Because we have about 4 or 5 minutes left. If anybody has questions, now's a great time to ask. Bob, any other questions that you can see?
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, keep them coming. Marcus, I would just say, based on the questions we had before, more inspiration. Is there any other use cases of they ask you answer? You know, a lot of the people are in the BBB tend to be more in the construction, more B2B. So have you
mean like commercial construction?
Some really cool things of how they ask you answer has worked?
Yeah, it's just one of those things where, you know, there's a lot of examples. So if you give me a specific industry, I can at that point say, here's an example of the content you should be producing in that space, right? But if you're very in tuned, you know, what's interesting about this is when I talk, they ask you answer to sales teams, they usually get it much faster than business owners. And now the reason for this is because, and this isn't a knock, well, I mean, in some ways it is, because as business owners, we're not always hearing the questions all day long that the buyer is asking, right? And so it's just, we're just doing other things. But if you want to get inspired, and I tell this to marketers all the time, because sometimes marketers will come to me and say, I just don't know the questions our buyers are asking. And I say, when was the last time you spent a day with a salesperson looking at their emails, answering their emails with them, going on a sales appointment with them, on their Zoom calls with them, of course, in 2020, whatever the thing is. And all of a sudden you start to see every question you hear could be a piece of content that's on your website. You know, it doesn't matter. You know, we have, with Impact, our agency, we have a mindset. With River Pools on the manufacturing side and on the install side, we have a mindset, and that is this. We hear a question from a customer or prospect, and we ask ourselves first, in the back of our head, why don't they ask me that right now? Have we not talked about it? And usually, it's one of two things. We've either, or one of three things. We've either A, we've not talked about it, which means we should. B, we've talked about it, but we haven't shown it very well. Or C, we've talked about it. It's on the website, but we didn't take the time to make sure the salesperson integrated it into the sales process. Because of that, the buyer was allowed to be more uninformed. And so if you ask any salesperson, would you rather have more qualified buyers? Everybody's going to say yes. If you ask any salesperson, what percentage of the questions you get when you meet with a prospect for the first time are very similar? They're going to say, oh, a high percentage. Why do we keep hearing the same questions? It's because as a whole, we are not world-class at answering them. Well, you say, well, but we're very, very customized. Once you start to really see this, you start to see the principles that galvanize across the board, each case study, if you will. And so you're able to answer more than you realize, again, in most cases. And you don't need to put yourself in a corner that you can't back out of. Because if the answer is it depends, just explain why it depends. Mm-hmm. Remember, this is one last thing I'll say about this. It's not always that you have to give the exact answer because you can't, but you do have to address the question. You can address a lot of questions and explain why you can't specifically answer it. Give pointers and still win the day, win the trust. That's the key to this. So, you know, I could have called the book They Ask You Address It Really Well, but that wouldn't have sounded very cool. So that's why you want to keep that in mind as you go forward with this mindset. Anything else, Bob?
Yeah, a couple more quick questions here. Any recommendations on ratio of images to written content on your most visited website pages?
So we just have a general rule of thumb, you know, and one thing that we did this year is we took the most viewed articles on the website and we made sure that there was a video for each one. So we embedded the video in each one. We always try to have at least one image. Oftentimes, though, if it's longer piece of content, we have more. A good rule of thumb for images, a great rule of thumb, is 1 per 500 words. 1 per 500 words. If you can do that, you're really creating this beautiful magazine-like experience for the viewer. It's a good rule of thumb.
Yeah, and I would just add a couple things. Make sure you're optimizing your images. Heavy images can slow down your site, which really affects your search rankings. So if you're looking to do this for SEO, make sure you really optimize the size of your image files. And don't use stock photos. For the love of God, don't use stock photos. Use pictures of your real customers, your real people, your real products. Lean into that as much as you possibly can. Everyone can recognize a stock photo, so avoid that as much as possible. And then the last question here, how do you get your staff confident about the articles and content?
This is such a great question, Bob. I'm glad you bring it up. This is why we believe so much in the coaching model, you know, and believe in this mindset of teach a man or woman how to fish, feed them for a lifetime. You know, so many companies and salespeople especially could be great on video, but they've never been trained. They could be great with content production, but they've never been trained. And it doesn't take a ton of training for them to get good very quickly. We've seen this. And so by offering the training, instead of just saying, stand in front of the camera and start talking, that sets them up for failure. And so that's the mindset that you want to have. You know, I think we've got to run. This was really, really wonderful. I'm glad that we could be a part of it with Impact. We're cheering all you businesses on. Again, don't hesitate to reach out to me, to Bob as well, because, you know, I know it sounds cliche, but we, as businesses, we're in this together, and as the BBB, we're in it together. So it was a pleasure. Thank you, Bob.
Awesome. Thank you, Marcus. And I've seen Marcus give this talk hundreds of times at this point. Crushes it every single time. So thank you, Marcus. Thank you, everyone. Please continue to enjoy the Better Business Summit. We've got lots of content lined up for you over the next few days. So if you haven't registered for the next event, make sure you sign up for that. And we will see you throughout the week. Thanks, everyone.